Hi, I'm Sarah. Last winter, I gave my coat to an old woman shivering on the sidewalk. My mother saw and laughed. Why waste time on street trash? My sister joined in. She probably faked it. But what they didn't know, that woman rewrote my story, starting with the front gate. And 30 minutes later, 9 black SUVs pulled up outside our house. Not for them, for me. What happened next still gives them nightmares. Before we dive in, what would you have done in my place? And where are you listening from tonight? Tell me in the comments. It had been drizzling since morning, thin needles of rain tapping the roof like a clock I couldn't shut off. I had just pulled into the driveway with a trunk full of groceries when I saw her, an older woman, maybe in her 70s, was standing still by our mailbox. Not just standing, trembling. Her hair was drenched. Her coat clung to her frame like wet paper, and her shoes looked worn to the seams. I squinted through the windshield. Nobody else was outside. I grabbed my umbrella and hurried over, pulling my hoodie tighter against the rain. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. She didn't look at me at first, just kept staring down the street. Then she blinked slowly, her lips trembling. I was just trying to get to the corner. I think I took the wrong turn." Her words floated out like mist. "Okay," I said gently. "Let's get you out of the rain first, all right? Come sit on our porch." I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her skin felt cool and fragile beneath my touch, like tracing paper. I walked her slowly toward the steps, my arm around her. From the front door, I heard it, the screech of hinges. Then, my mother's voice, sharp as a snapped twig. "Oh, for God's sake, Sarah, why do you always pick up strays?" She stood in the doorway with one hand on her hip, the other holding a wine glass. Mark and Jessica were behind her, dry and smug. Mark smirked. "Still playing Florence Nightingale?" "Huh," Jessica added. "You're soaking Sarah. Are you trying to catch pneumonia for a stranger?" I didn't answer. I helped the woman onto the porch swing and crouched beside her. "My name's Sarah. What's yours?" She paused, then gave me a shy smile. "Eleanor." "Well, Eleanor, I said you're safe now. Let me call someone to help." I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency line. A calm dispatcher picked up and promised to send someone from social services right away. From the corner of my eye, I saw Linda, the woman I called Mother, roll her eyes so hard I thought she might sprain something. "Let's just hope she doesn't sue us," she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. But Eleanor just patted my hand. "You don't need to stay. I'm used to waiting." "No," I said. "You shouldn't have to be." We sat in silence for a while, the porch creaking under the rain. 20 minutes passed. Then a town car, not a police cruiser or van, but a sleek black Lincoln, rolled into our cul-de-sac. It stopped right in front of our house. The driver stepped out, opened the door, and walked briskly toward us with an umbrella. "Miss Whitmore," he said. Eleanor stood slowly, letting go of my hand, but not before giving it a gentle squeeze. "I'm all right now," she said softly. "Thank you, dear." The driver took her arm, helping her into the car. As it pulled away, I could still feel the imprint of her fingers in mine, dry, now soft, like old silk. I turned to go inside, but my mother was already coming down the steps. "Well, that was dramatic," she said. "Let me guess. You're going to post about this Sarah saves sad woman in the rain." I didn't answer. I brought the groceries inside, wiped down the counter, put the milk in the fridge. Everything felt louder. The clink of cereal boxes, the hum of the fridge, the rain against the kitchen window. 30 minutes later, I heard it engines. 9 black SUVs, silent smooth. One by one, they pulled into the street and stopped directly in front of our house. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. My breath hitched. Mark was already at the door, frozen. Jessica stood behind him, pale as chalk. And Linda gripped the doorway, whispering, "What the hell did you do?" The lead SUV door opened. A tall man in a tailored gray suit stepped out holding a clipboard. He looked directly at me. "Ms. Matthews," he said, "Eleanor would like a word with you." I felt every pair of eyes shift from him to me. I straightened my back, heart pounding, and stepped forward. Behind me, nobody said a word, but I heard their thoughts as clear as a radio dial. "What's happening? Why, Sarah? Who the hell is Eleanor?" And just like that, the woman they mocked had more power than anyone in our family ever did. The door clicked shut behind me, with a padded finality sealing me inside the SUV. Outside, my mother's shrill voice pierced the damp air, demanding answers. I didn't look back. Inside, it was quiet, eerily so. The interior smelled faintly of leather and lavender. Across from me, Eleanor sat with her hands folded neatly over a silk clutch. No trace of the disoriented woman I'd helped just moments before. She looked calm, regal even. "Sarah," she said warmly, like we were old friends, reunited after years. "I hope you're comfortable." I nodded, still trying to catch up. My fingers rested nervously on my knee. You're not homeless." She smiled, the lines around her eyes softening. "No, dear. Though, thank you for treating me as if that didn't matter." There was a long pause between us. My chest tightened, unsure whether I should be embarrassed or proud. Eleanor leaned slightly closer. "I vanish sometimes," she explained. "Slip into the unnoticed corners of the world. You'd be surprised how fast people show you who they really are when they think you have nothing." I glanced out the tinted window. My family was still huddled together on the porch. Mark, with his hands on his hips, Jessica whispering into her phone. Mom, with that frozen smile she used when things were slipping beyond her control. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Why come to me?" She didn't hesitate. "Because you didn't flinch. You didn't patronize. You didn't perform kindness to be seen." My throat tightened. "I didn't do anything special." "Exactly," she said, eyes glinting. "And that's what makes it extraordinary." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a slim, ivory envelope, but didn't hand it to me yet. Instead, she studied my face. "I don't offer this to many people," Eleanor said, "but I owe you a favor, a meaningful one. Whatever you need, ask." I blinked. "I don't need anything." "Then, don't see it as a reward," she replied. "Think of it as an investment in someone worth investing in." I didn't know what to say. The idea of asking for anything made me feel strange. I wasn't used to being offered things without strings. "I'll think about it," I said. At last, voice barely audible. She nodded. "That's fair." Another silence fell, this one less awkward and more spacious. I caught my reflection in the window, damp hair grocery tote still beside me on the floor, and felt oddly exposed. I followed her gaze outside toward my family, still craning their necks. "They're wondering if I'm being arrested," I muttered. "I imagine they're always wondering what's wrong with you," she said, not unkindly. "But here's the thing. You can choose whether your kindness stays quiet or whether you let it echo loud enough to drown out their judgment." I sat with that for a moment. Part of me wanted to shrink back into the comfort of silence, but another part, the one that had walked Eleanor to the curb while my mother screamed, that part was stirring. "I need some time," I said. She smiled again. "Of course, but do check your inbox tonight. Before I could ask what that meant, the driver opened the door for me. I stepped out slowly, heart pounding. The air had shifted, somehow charged. Watching Mark took a few steps forward. What the hell was that? Jessica's eyes narrowed. Who is she? What's going on? And Mom? She stood at the top of the porch, arms folded. Sarah, don't you dare drag this family into your weird projects again. I looked at each of them. Their faces were so familiar, so tired, so sure of their own version of me. She remembered my name, I said, simply. Mark scoffed. That's it? I gave a small smile. That's enough. And I turned and walked past them into the house, letting the screen door slam shut behind me. Later that evening, after I'd put away the groceries and dried off, I sat on the edge of my bed. My laptop glowed in the dark, casting a pale blue hue over the room. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but curiosity had gotten the better of me. There it was. Subject line, Sarah Matthews. A conversation worth having. I clicked it open. There were 3 attachments, a document titled Character Summary, another marked Proposal, and the last observations. My breath caught. The first file contained what looked like a background check, but not the cold criminal kind. This was personal notes about my freelance design work. Glowing mentions from obscure blog editors I barely remembered, contributing to comments on how I handled a difficult client with empathy. Even a quote I'd written once in a forum about caring for my aging neighbor while juggling deadlines. The observations file went deeper. Quotes, memories declined, credit from neighbor, never posted about charity work, refused to speak ill of family despite provocation. I scrolled down my chest, rising and falling with each line. One note read, likely unaware of own strength. And at the bottom, in elegant cursive kindness, given freely, is power in disguise. Just then, a soft chime sounded from the driveway. I jumped to the window. Eleanor's SUV was rolling away slow and silent, like it had never really been there at all. But before it turned the corner, the back window lowered just a crack, enough for her voice to reach me faint but unmistakable. Sarah, check your inbox tonight. Then she was gone. That email changed everything. I didn't sleep much that night. Even with the house quiet and the lights out, my mind kept circling back to that email, to Eleanor's voice echoing just outside the glass. I must have read it 3, maybe 4 times, the blue light of the screen flickering in the dark like a secret only I was allowed to see. It was just past midnight when I clicked it open again. This time, I didn't skim. I let each word settle. Subject line, a personal invitation sender, assistant to Ms. Eleanor Whitmore. Body, you are cordially invited to a private brunch at the residence of Eleanor Whitmore. No formal dress required. You are the only guest. Date tomorrow time, 10:00 a.m. Address, Bel Air, CA. Those who judge least often carry the most. No RSVP, no explanation. Just that quote and my name. At 2:11 a.m., I was still awake, sitting on the edge of my bed in an oversized t-shirt, staring at the ceiling fan. Something in my chest stirred. Not fear, not quite excitement. Something else. By 7:00, I was up. I took a long shower, dried my hair, slow. I didn't tell anyone. Not a soul. Especially not my mother. I knew what she'd say. And like clockwork, just as I was about to step out, she appeared at the front door, holding her coffee cup like a microphone, and wearing that robe with the lipstick stain on the collar. "Where are you headed?" she asked, squinting. "Out," I said, simply adjusting my jacket. "That's not an answer." She leaned against the doorframe. "You're not going to that woman's house, are you?" I didn't reply. Her tone sharpened. You think she's your ticket out, Sarah. You're chasing status like it's some lottery prize. Let me tell you something. Sweetheart people like her don't do anything without a price tag. I paused in the hallway, one hand on the doorknob. You think kindness is always a transaction, don't you? She sipped her coffee. I think people like you need to stop begging strangers for scraps. You've always had a roof, haven't you? Food. What more do you want? I didn't answer. I just walked out, slow and quiet. The door clicked behind me, the same way it had shut on Eleanor's car the day before. The trip to Bel Air wasn't easy. I took a bus, then a train, and finally, 2 ride shares. I didn't want to leave a digital trail. Not yet. The second driver looked at me funny when I gave him the address. You sure that's where you're going, ma'am? He asked. These places got gates taller than my truck. I nodded. Yes, I'm expected. He dropped me at the gate. Within seconds, it opened. No questions, no keypad. Just a smooth glide of steel. Security greeted me by name. Their tone was warm, not stiff. One of the women offered me water. Another carried my small tote like it was Chanel. Eleanor's estate didn't scream money. It whispered it. Ivy wrapped around stone pillars, a scent of citrus trees in bloom. But what caught my attention wasn't the architecture. It was the silence. Like the land itself was breathing slow. I was led through a garden path toward the house. Then the front door opened before I could knock. Eleanor stood there in cream slacks and a blue linen blouse, holding 2 mugs of tea. You came, she said, smiling. I wasn't sure if I should, I admitted. And yet, here you are, she said, handing me the cup. Come. We didn't go straight to brunch. Instead, she walked me through what she called her gallery, a sunlit hallway, lined with portraits, sketches, and photographs. None of them had labels, no names, just faces. This man. She pointed to a faded photo of a janitor with kind eyes, invented a recycling process that saved a city millions. No one ever interviewed him. He died before he got credit. She moved to a watercolor of a teenage girl in a hoodie. She started a literacy program at her trailer park, got over 200 kids reading, never made it past high school herself, and on and on. People I'd never heard of, people society didn't applaud, but their stories lived here, held up in light and gold leaf frames. When we finally reached the dining patio, I wasn't hungry, but I sat down anyway. The table overlooked a quiet lake. A single swan drifted by, unbothered. Eleanor poured me orange juice and said, Tell me, Sarah, what do you want? Not what you do, not what you've survived. What do you want? The question landed like a stone in water. No one had ever asked me that before. Not like that. I looked down at my plate, then back up at her. And for once, I didn't edit myself. I want peace, I said. Not the kind you beg for in arguments. I want to wake up and not feel like I owe someone an explanation just for being here. She nodded slowly. I want to stop being the one who smooths things over, the one who takes the blame so the others don't have to feel uncomfortable. I want to matter without shouting. There was a long silence. She looked at me like she already knew. Then she said it soft as wind, the people who break you aren't always strangers. I exhaled, and it felt like letting go of 10 years in a single breath. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet envelope. Then, maybe it's time you had a space where your voice doesn't have to echo back unanswered. I opened it carefully. Inside was a notarized letter, a deed. Eleanor Whitmore was offering me full ownership of a downtown property, a creative studio she never used, but had kept for the right hands. I stared at it. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Finally, I found my voice. Why me? She looked me straight in the eye. Because you didn't look away when others did. And that is rarer than wealth. The deed felt heavier than it should have. Not in weight, but in meaning. And then my phone buzzed on the table. Mom. Her name lit up the screen like a warning flare. I didn't even need to answer. Of course, she'd already heard about it. I didn't even get a hello. The moment I picked up the phone, my mother's voice cut through like glass on concrete. Who gave you permission to embarrass us like that? I froze on the steps outside Eleanor's studio, the velvet envelope still in my bag. Her tone wasn't questioning. It was accusing, as if my very existence had trespassed on some sacred family boundary. What are you talking about? Oh, don't act dumb. Sarah, she snapped. You think we don't see what you're doing? A fancy brunch with some rich old woman, getting your face tagged in some assistant's post, like you're a charity case. How dare you make us look like beggars? I didn't ask her for anything, I said, trying to stay calm. She invited me. I went. Oh, you went all right. And now your sister's crying in her car because she lost a downtown lead. She's been chasing for weeks. What? You knew. She had her eye on that area. I didn't know. She said, Eleanor Whitmore owns it. And now you've secured it. Did you hustle her? Sarah, is that how low you've sunk? Each word struck like a slap. My chest felt tight, not from shame, but from disbelief. I didn't ask Eleanor for anything. I said slowly. She offered it. I didn't even know what it was until she gave me the envelope. You manipulated some old woman who doesn't know better. My father cut in suddenly. He must have been on speaker. This isn't ambition. It's disgrace. I didn't manipulate anyone, I whispered, but my voice sounded so small, even to me. There was a pause. Then, Mom said the words that didn't surprise me, but still stung like they were brand new. You've always been selfish, Sarah, always needing attention. Well, now you got it. Don't come running back. The line went dead. I stood there for a while, letting the chill of dusk settle over my skin. The neighborhood was quiet trees, rustling gently above the studio's roof. I could still smell the lavender from Eleanor's garden on my scarf. I thought about calling back, explaining, begging for a little understanding. But I didn't. I didn't go home either. Not that it mattered, because when I finally mustered the courage to go back later that evening, I found the locks changed. A note, taped to the door, unsigned, read, You made your choice. Respect ours. My name had already been removed from the family phone plan. My number blinked, not in service on the group text thread. My belongings boxed, labeled and set on the front porch like leftovers from a garage sale. A few pieces of clothing were still damp from the sprinklers, as if someone had put them there just before turning the water on. I didn't cry. Not right away. I drove back to the studio in silence, my car filled with cardboard boxes and a hollow thud in my chest. The studio was empty, its floors bare, and its windows clouded with dust. But it was mine. And in that strange emptiness, something inside me settled. I spread a thin blanket across the floor and curled up under my coat. At some point in the night, I let the tears come, but only once, and they didn't last long, because as I stared at the ceiling, I realized at least this silence was honest. No guilt, no pretense, no pretending I was part of something I never truly belonged to. The morning sunlight cut through the dusty window panes in soft golden shafts. I rose slowly, bones sore from the hardwood floor, and padded barefoot into what had once been a small office. There, Inside the drawer of an old desk Eleanor had left behind was a folded note in her handwriting. "Don't forget to dream in this place." I traced the letters with my fingertips. The ink looked like it had been written slowly, deliberately, like someone who had built dreams before and knew how heavy they could be. Later that day, as I stepped outside with a garbage bag full of packing peanuts, a woman walking her dog paused at the gate. She looked to be in her 70s, short silver hair, strong posture, kind eyes. The kind of woman who always seems to know everything about the neighborhood without saying much. "You must be Sarah," she said. I blinked. "Yes, How did you know?" She smiled, gently. "Miss Whitmore mentioned you. Said you had heart. Said she'd finally found someone who wouldn't look away." The dog barked once, then sat patiently. "I'm Dorothy. I've lived next door for 38 years. If you ever need anything, tools, sugar, just someone to talk to, you knock, and welcome." I thanked her with a grateful nod that felt heavier than it should have. That night, after eating crackers and peanut butter on the studio floor, I opened my laptop. The internet was spotty, but good enough. I started drafting something. Not a business plan, not a job resume, just an idea, a sentence. Home for the overlooked. A space, not just for me, but for women who had been cast aside, underestimated, told to be quiet, told they were too much or not enough. A space with room for dreaming again, creating again, and maybe belonging. My hands trembled slightly as I typed. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, like my soul was finally waking up after a long, long sleep. Then, just as I was closing my laptop, my phone buzzed. It was a message request from an unknown number. "Hey, I want to volunteer. Grandma says I'm grounded if I talk to you. But I don't care. Emma." Emma, my youngest cousin. 14, maybe 15 now. Sweet, quiet, always watching. I stared at the screen, heart thudding. A beat of emotion tightened in my throat. Not from sadness, but from something closer, to hope. She remembered me. She saw me. And she chose to reach out anyway. My eyes watered, but they didn't break. They sharpened. If my family wanted to write me out, I'd write something stronger. Something they couldn't erase. And it started with a hammer, a paintbrush, and a $40 chair. I still remember the sound that first swing made against the cracked drywall, like a punctuation mark on my old life. The paintbrush followed, dipped in soft teal, sweeping over years of silence with every stroke. The chair, it was lopsided, the cushion threadbare. But I cleaned it up, fastened the legs tighter, and placed it in the corner, like it belonged there, like I belonged here. Eleanor had sent a couple of contractors to make sure the wiring was up to code and the plumbing wouldn't explode. After that, she let me take the reins. I don't think she did it to test me. More like she trusted me. Or maybe she knew I needed this to feel real. I turned that dusty old studio into a space where the walls didn't echo judgment, where a woman could stand in her truth without getting cut down for being too much or not enough. Midway through sanding an old workbench, I heard the crunch of gravel outside. I peeked through the slatted window blinds and saw her Dorothy from 2 doors down, in her floral visor and matching gloves, holding her dog like a prop. Her lips moved fast, neck craning like a rooster, looking for an audience. I didn't even have to guess who she was talking to. That afternoon, just before sunset, my aunt's white sedan pulled into the drive. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stepped outside. She didn't even look at the brush strokes or the fresh lumber, just crossed her arms and said, "You think some concrete walls make you independent. This isn't a life, Sarah. It's a tantrum." I said nothing, just leaned against the door frame, letting her voice ricochet off the siding. Your mother's heartbroken. Your sister's humiliated. Your father says you're making the family look like fools. And what do you think I asked? She hesitated. I think you used to be smarter than this. Then she turned and walked back to her car, not even waiting for a goodbye. The next morning, I was scrubbing old tiles in the kitchenette when a knock landed on the door. 4 sharp taps. I opened it to see my brother-in-law, shoulders stiff, holding a manila envelope like it was radioactive. From your parents, he said flatly. You've been officially removed from the will. I didn't reach for it. He dropped it on the porch. I wasn't expecting anything anyway, I muttered. He paused. That's not the point. They wanted you to know. I stood there in silence until he left. The envelope sat there for a while before I finally brought it in and tucked it in the back of a drawer, unopened. Later that week, while I was labeling makeshift shelves with painter's tape and a Sharpie, Eleanor showed up. No announcement, just her soft knock and a smile. She stepped inside, eyes scanning the half-painted walls and the folding chairs stacked by the door. It reminds me of my first office, she said. Only I had mustard-colored carpet and a broken ceiling fan. I laughed. I haven't even figured out where the bathroom sign should go. She picked up a paint-stained ruler and tapped it against the wall. They told me I looked ridiculous in a hard hat, said I should marry well and let a man build the dreams for me. I stopped labeling. Eleanor's voice had shifted. Lower, firmer. So I built a skyscraper with my name on it. Her eyes met mine. There's a retreat coming up. Private. Women founders. No suits, no panels. Just space to think. I'm inviting you. Everything's covered. I blinked. Why? Because someone opened a door for me once. I'm just returning the favor. That night, I sat on the floor and rummaged through my old boxes, trying to find anything that said entrepreneur instead of family disappointment. I found a blazer from my college internship. Still had a name tag from a coffee expo tucked in the pocket. It was 2 sizes too big. The shoulder pads practically swallowed me. But I wore it anyway. Let them see what starting over really looked like. The retreat was at a lakeside lodge. Serene, polished, filled with women in tailored cashmere and minimalist jewelry. I walked in, heart-pounding the oversized blazer, itching against my neck. Eyes flicked my way, some smiling, others calculating. I made my way to the coffee table, hoping to find something to hold on to besides nerves. A woman in a soft green sweater leaned toward me, offering a paper cup. Don't let their pearls fool you, she said with a wink. They started somewhere, too. That small kindness steadied me more than caffeine ever could. Later, during a quiet breakout session, Eleanor introduced me to a woman named Lydia. Her voice was low, her presence sharp, like someone used to carrying weight in rooms where she wasn't supposed to speak. This is Sarah, Eleanor said. She's building something worth seeing. Lydia gave a polite nod. What kind of something? I tried to find the right words. It's a space for women who've been overlooked, a place to breathe, to rebuild. I call it home for the overlooked. Lydia tapped a finger against her notebook. That name, it sticks. Then, without a beat, she said, I'd like to see your studio tomorrow. I blinked. Why? She smiled, closed her notebook, and replied, because I fund places that feel like home. And you sound like home. I didn't sleep that night. I was too busy rewriting the floor plan in my head. I kept turning over every square inch of the studio in my mind. In the dark, the shelves rearranged themselves. The lighting changed. The workbench moved from one wall to another. I even dreamt of the cracked vase, sitting high above everything like a lighthouse, broken, but lit from within. By the time dawn peeked through the blinds, I was already up brushing my teeth with one hand and mentally listing everything I needed to clean, scrub, polish, or move. I skipped breakfast. My stomach was tight, not from fear, but from the pressure of needing everything to speak louder than words ever could. The mop squeaked across the floor, tracing every footstep I'd made the past week. I rearranged the clay pieces by color, then by form, then back by emotional tone. Because yes, even ceramics could carry mood if you let them. The cracked vase, the one I couldn't bring myself to toss, now sat right above the entryway. I hung it there deliberately, because it survived, and so had I. By mid-morning, the sun had warmed the front windows just enough to give the whole studio a golden, almost forgiving glow. I wiped sweat off my temple with the hem of my shirt and glanced at the clock. She was due any minute. I didn't hear heels on concrete, just the soft creak of the door as it opened. "Sarah," a voice called, warm but measured. I turned around, and there she stood, Lydia in a navy blazer over jeans that probably cost more than my rent. Her heels were slim, not loud, deliberate. Her eyes scanned everything, but not in a touristy way, more like she was listening with them. She didn't shake my hand, just nodded once. "It smells like real clay in here." I smiled. "I hope that's a compliment." She walked slowly, fingertips trailing along the edge of a glazed platter on the shelf. Then, after a pause, she pointed toward the ceiling. "That piece, the broken one. Why hang it where everyone can see it?" "Because it didn't shatter all the way," I said. "And neither did I." She nodded again, thoughtfully. "So why stay after they laughed at you, mocked your work, your name?" I looked straight at her. Because the laughter sounded familiar. It sounded like home. And I'm done letting that define me. Lydia's brow lifted just slightly. Not surprise, more like confirmation. Then she turned and walked the rest of the room silent, except for the gentle sound of her fingers, tapping a mug here, grazing a tray there. She stood by the window for a long moment, looking out at the scraggly backyard that still hadn't been cleared. "You're not asking for validation," she finally said. "That's rare, especially around here." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She pulled a slim business card from her coat pocket, turned it over, and scribbled a name and number on the back in quick, clean handwriting. "Call this woman. Her name's Grace. Don't pitch, just talk." Then she was gone. No promise, no handshake. Just the faint scent of citrus and leather left behind. That night, after pacing around the card, like it might burn me, I dialed. "Sarah." A smooth voice answered after 2 rings. "Yes, Lydia gave me your name." "I know who you are," Grace said warmly. "Eleanor's talked about you too. I'm with the California Arts Council. We're reviewing candidates for this year's Independent Creator Grant. I'd like you to apply." I blinked. "You'd like me to apply?" "Yes. I think your space has potential. Not just the art, but the mission. It doesn't feel performative. I don't even have a proper portfolio yet. You have breadth, don't you?" She chuckled. "That's a start." We spoke for another 10 minutes, mostly about clay grief and the strange comfort of working with our hands when our hearts don't know what to do. By the time I hung up, I'd already opened the application link. It was long. There were parts that felt foreign, like bios, goals, digital attachments. But what struck me hardest was the box at the end. "In your own words, what is your mission?" I stared at it for hours that night. I thought maybe my family might finally see something different in me. so I sent a short group message. Nothing dramatic. Something good might be coming. I'll tell you if it lands. Dad's reply came fast. An art grant. What's next? A Nobel Prize for finger painting. My fingers went cold. I didn't even finish reading. An hour later, my sister chimed in with her usual venom. Stop embarrassing yourself. You look desperate. The words hit me harder than I expected, not because they were cruel, but because I realized they were rehearsed. They'd probably been writing them in their heads for weeks, just waiting for me to give them an opening. I hovered over the delete application button. Then I remembered Eleanor's voice, so clear that day in the studio. You sound like home. I closed my eyes and whispered the phrase to myself, like a lifeline. I stayed up past midnight, writing that final box, to build a space where the overlooked become unforgettable. The moment I typed, that my hand started to tremble. Not from fear this time, not from shame or anger or doubt, but from finally choosing me. I clicked submit. I didn't tell anyone I'd applied, but someone else already knew. A soft chime pulled me to my phone as I was folding laundry on the studio's old leather couch. The subject line read, Spring Civic Arts Showcase. Official decision. My fingers hovered. I hadn't dared to hope too loudly, not even to myself. I tapped. Congratulations. Your application has been selected for full funding and featured inclusion in the Spring Civic Arts Showcase. We're honored to uplift your voice. I blinked. Then I reread it. Again. Then, one more time, just to be sure I hadn't misunderstood or dreamt the whole thing. My hands went cold. My heart was drumming fast and tight. I sat down on the floor without realizing, it knees folding beneath me as the email shimmered on the screen, like something holy. I didn't cry right away. At first, I just felt still, like something inside me had been holding its breath for decades, and finally exhaled. Then the tears came. Quiet, warm, steady. The phone rang. Eleanor, I'm guessing you got the email, I could barely whisper. Yes. You ready to make them eat their words? She said, gentle but proud. Because I am. That night, I didn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't from doubt. I pulled out every old sketch, every busted pot I'd tucked into corners, too embarrassed to throw away, but too hurt to show. I lined them up like battle-worn soldiers, each one a reminder of the mess I came from and what I'd built with it anyway. The next few days blurred into motion. I repaired the cracked clay sculpture I'd kept hidden the longest. My first big failure. I called it inheritance. I filled the golden seams with real thread, this time stitch by stitch. I remembered Mom's voice on my worst day. What will you do when they all laugh? I smiled. I'll do this. I printed photos Eleanor had helped me take, snapshots of me working by candlelight when the power got cut, of that first little boy from the shelter holding my smallest bowl like it was treasure. Every title I typed onto a label came from some wound. One piece I named The Uninvited, another The Thankless Dinner. Grace dropped by the studio midweek clipboard, in hand, bringing a team of bright-eyed volunteers from the local arts council. She walked in like it was already hers. We'll get these lights rewired, she said, and make sure the entrance meets ADA standards. Wait, I don't even know if I can afford. You won't have to, she cut me off, smiling. Your story's already moving people. Donations started coming in before I even made the second call. By the following weekend, folks I'd never met were offering to help hang installations, clean the display tables, repaint the trim. A guy named Paul offered free security. "My niece knows your work," he said. She said it helped her get through rehab. Word spread. Even my landlord, who used to give me grief about every penny, came by with paint buckets and said, "Guess I should stop threatening eviction. You're about to put us on the map." I didn't say anything. I just handed him a brush. But it wasn't all applause. One evening, just as I was labeling the final sculpture, my mom looked up from her church bulletin at dinner and said offhandedly, "Patricia said she heard your name mentioned at the Civic Center. What's that about?" My father didn't even look up from his mashed potatoes. "Heard the city's showing trash now. Good for them." I waited a beat. My fork paused in the air. Then I said, "Thanks," and kept eating. It tasted like sawdust, but I swallowed it anyway. The day of the showcase came with gray skies, but a strange lightness in my chest. I arrived too early. The Civic Arts Center gleamed in the overcast light, its glass doors tall and unapologetic. Inside, a long banner stretched across the atrium, Spring Civic Arts Showcase, featuring Sarah Matthews. My name, public, permanent. Eleanor stood just to the left, speaking with a few city council members. She looked radiant, not in a fancy way, but like someone who knew exactly what she'd done and why it mattered. "Break a leg," she mouthed. I smiled. People began to pour in. Strangers, families, students from the nearby college artists I'd admired from afar. They touched the cracked bowls, the gold seams. They asked questions. They whispered names of their own pains into the quiet of the exhibit, like the room itself had permission to hold them. Then I saw her. Jessica, sunglasses on indoors, lips pressed tight, hair styled but messy at the ends, as if she'd gotten ready in a hurry and then run out of gas. She wasn't walking with pride. She wasn't there to celebrate. She was scanning the room, and when her eyes landed on Eleanor, her whole face changed. I moved closer, just enough to hear as Eleanor turned from the mayor and caught Jessica's eye. No smile, no wave, just a crisp line. "Ethical conflicts, Jessica. That's what we call it when your fiancé uses city money to build his personal summer home." Jessica tried to interrupt. "Eleanor, please. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. And I'm not interested in negotiations," Eleanor said, turning back to her conversation, like nothing had happened. I felt the shift in the air before anyone else did. My sister turned toward me, then eyes frantic. She started walking my way. "Sarah." I didn't flinch. I didn't nod. Instead, I walked forward toward the podium. The crowd hushed. The mic waited. I placed one hand on the edge of the wood and looked out. The spotlight was hot on my face, but this time it didn't burn. It lit the room, like morning. I looked out across the crowd. Some faces were familiar neighbors, old teachers, people I'd once passed on my way to class. Others were strangers, but they were all quiet, waiting. I inhaled just once, slow and full. Then I began. Most people think cruelty is loud, but sometimes it's the silence that breaks you. My voice didn't waver. I didn't shout. For years, I tried to be small enough, quiet enough, good enough. A few heads tilted forward. The room leaned in. When I was 12, I saw a woman crying in the produce aisle. Her coat was ripped. The cashier had just tossed her food stamps back at her. She walked out without saying a word. I followed her outside and gave her my lunch money. I paused. My mother laughed when I told her, said I'd wasted it. But that was the first time I understood what it meant to choose dignity over comfort. Behind me, a screen flickered on. I hadn't planned it, but Eleanor's team had. Clips played quietly. Me shaping clay at the community center. Little hands pressing into wet plaster. Elderly women laughing as they painted broken teacups gold. The sound faded in. Voices. She helped me believe in myself again. She didn't care I couldn't pay. She just said, "Come in." She looked me in the eye like I mattered. I gripped the podium tighter. Someone sniffled in the front row. The lights warmed my face, but they didn't feel harsh. They felt earned. I kept going. My art isn't about galleries or grants. It's about the parts of ourselves we're told are worthless, and the people we become when we decide that's not true. Applause broke out. Soft at first, then growing. I glanced toward the back. Eleanor stood with her arms crossed, loosely lips curled into a quiet smile. She nodded just once. My gaze shifted. There they were. My mother stiffened when I looked at her. My father was rubbing the back of his neck, suddenly fascinated by the floor. And my sister looked like she hadn't slept. Sunglasses pushed up onto her head, red-rimmed eyes. She tried to smile. She wasn't here to celebrate. She was here to salvage whatever could still be saved. And that, too, was its own kind of poetry. The mayor stepped forward, holding something in both hands. I turned, slightly blinking, as she read aloud. For contributions to the dignity, healing, and artistic life of this city, we hereby recognize Sarah Matthews and proclaim this day as Restoration Through Art Day. A framed certificate shimmered under the lights. I took it, nodded, whispered, "Thank you." Then from offstage, I heard it. "Sarah." It was my father's voice. I turned. Could we talk outside?" I hesitated, then handed the plaque off to Eleanor, who gave me a quick thumbs up and a go-get-'em under her breath. Outside, the early evening air was cool, not cold. I stepped down the stone path toward the courtyard where they were waiting. Both of them. My mother still looked impeccable. Hair-perfect jewelry, understated but expensive. My father stood with his hands in his pockets, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Why didn't you tell us she was someone important?" my mother asked sharply. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked past them. The sun was setting, coloring the brick walls gold. Then I met her eyes and said softly, "Because you were supposed to be." That shut them up. My father cleared his throat. "So what?" Now I didn't smile. I didn't raise my voice. "I've been appointed to the city's Arts Council. Eleanor nominated me, and the board voted last week." Silence. Then my mother's brows knit together. "Wait, so you'll be reviewing funding?" "Yes," I said plainly. "Every proposal with a public grant attached goes across my desk first, including development projects." My sister's fiancé's name wasn't spoken. It didn't have to be. The expression on my father's face said it all. "You're telling me," he began, then stopped. "You have that kind of say." I looked him straight in the eye. "I do." Then I turned. Behind me, their silence pressed like an invisible hand. But I didn't carry it anymore. I walked back into the building just as the NBC camera crew waved me over. I'd agreed to a short interview after the speech. The reporter adjusted her mic and said brightly, "Ready?" I nodded, taking my seat. And this time, they had no control over how the story would be told. The camera lights dimmed, and the studio returned to its usual soft hush. After the broadcast ended, I sat there still under the faint warmth of the stage lights, while the producer patted my shoulder and said, "You just gave a lot of people something to hold on to tonight." It wasn't about vindication. It wasn't even about being heard. It was about finally speaking without shame. That night, the NBC clip aired during the 10 hour news. Just a 3-minute segment but it caught fire. I stayed up late sipping chamomile tea in my small living room as my phone buzzed endlessly. Messages rolled in, some from old art students, some from strangers. My sister laughed at me for years. "You made me feel seen tonight. I hope my daughter sees this one day. Thank you. I never thought kindness could be honored on TV." By midnight, the clip had been shared over 70,000 times. My inbox was flooded, but I didn't respond to anyone. Not yet. Instead, I turned off my phone, walked into the corner of the studio that doubled as my bedroom, and stared at the canvas I'd left unfinished for months. A wash of warm gray stretched across it, meant to be a foundation for something bigger, but I hadn't known what until now. The next morning, I woke to a text from my father. Just 2 words: dinner tomorrow, no apology, no reflection, just a schedule. I stared at the screen for a long while. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then, finally, I typed, "I'm busy," indefinitely. I didn't send it immediately. I sat with it, let it live in silence for a bit. Then, I pressed send, exhaled, and got dressed. Later that week, I walked into Eleanor's downtown property for the first time, with my own keys in hand. She'd signed it over quietly the day after the speech. "I don't want to own what was never mine," she said, and handed me the deed. It was a modest space, tucked between a consignment bookstore and a laundromat. But to me, it might as well have been the Met. For days, I swept painted, rearranged lighting, hung drywall, where needed. Eleanor stopped by, sometimes never interfering, just passing me a bottle of water, offering a smirk, then walking on. One night, a month before the official opening, I stood in the space alone and hung a final piece. I titled it Inheritance, a simple painting, soft brush strokes. It showed a coat folded, resting on a park bench, the same coat I'd once draped over a stranger in a rainstorm. A flash from the past caught me off guard. I saw myself months earlier, soaked to the bone, outside a 7-Eleven, holding a cup of instant noodles with trembling hands. My mother's voice still rang in my ears. "From that day, you gave away your last coat to a homeless woman. Sarah, have you completely lost your mind?" That woman had been Eleanor. Back then, I didn't know her name. I only saw someone shivering harder than me, and I gave her what I had. Now, here we were. Opening night arrived on the last Saturday of March. The gallery glowed under warm lighting, and a small crowd had gathered before the doors. Reporters from 2 local news outlets waited with cameras. Inside, I adjusted the mic on the small podium. Eleanor stood beside me in a gray coat that reminded me of that night so long ago, but clean-tailored and dignified. When the clock struck 7, I took the mic. "Thank you for coming. This place isn't just a gallery. It's a second chance. For stories that were overlooked, for kindness that was mistaken for weakness, and for people who were told by the world or their own families that they were too soft to matter." A pause. I'd like to announce the launch of the Whitmore Foundation. Together we're creating a grant program to support young women who've been told they were too much or not enough. Eleanor is matching my donation, and we're here to tell them, you are exactly right. Applause filled the space, slow and reverent. Then, just as the line began moving toward the exhibit entrance, I saw them, my parents, my sister, her fiancé, waiting in line. My father wore a tired expression, shoulders slouched. My mother's hair was perfect, but her eyes weren't. They were restless. My sister clutched her fiancé's arm, as if needing to hold on to something steady. They reached the front. I looked at them. They looked at me. For a brief second, I thought I might open the door. I really did, but instead, I nodded, just enough to acknowledge their presence. And then, I turned, walked back inside, and closed the glass door behind me. The cameras caught the moment, but this time, it wasn't their story to tell. Later that night, as the last guests trickled out, Eleanor and I stood by the front window. We looked out over the street. The city was quiet. Her voice, low beside me, broke the silence. Funny how people think quiet means weak. I smiled faintly. Sometimes quiet means finished. And just like that, the girl they called Soft became the woman who said no. Softly, but finally.